So, hello everyone. Amelia, Queen Llama here, and welcome to the Themysciran Agenda, a monthly talk show dedicated to all things Wonder Woman. Before we jump in, of course, I just want to go quickly over the format of the episode. I'm always open to suggestions post-show. So, sorry, my voice seems really loud. So I don't want to blast your ears. Okay, anyway. So this episode's a bit different. You know, I'm just discussing recent comics, specifically G. Willow Wilson's 101 run, and you might recognize her, I hope so, from her series Miss Marvel that she did for Marvel. So a pretty big writer on this character. I'm covering issues 60 through 65, but I'll do kind of brief summary of 58 through 59, which was the last two eps, which is where she kind of started. I'll include a brief summary, spoilers involved, general impressions, and my criticisms. And then I'll move on to answering some of the questions I got online from friends, and any questions that you have asked during the stream. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Before I hop into like the meat of her run, any questions that anyone has? Okay. So, previously on Wonder Woman. So, 60 through 65 is continuing what started out in 58 through 59, where Wonder Woman confronts Ares in this war-torn nation that's in a bloody civil war all of a sudden, like it kicks back up. And so they're going toe-to-toe. Diana's trying to stop Ares because she always thinks he's up to something, and she realizes that he's a changed god. He's not the same god that we recognize or that she's gone toe-to-toe against. So, you know, originally what I had hoped that was kind of going to be the focus of Ares was such a big part of it was that they were going to kind of focus on the geopolitical issues involved with fighting in the middle of a civil war and like what happens when the god of war shows up to your doorstep. But the story has taken a different direction, and that's both good and bad. 60 through 65 kind of focuses more on after Ares, like after the fight, because it's actually not really that big of a not necessarily, it's not a main focus for the story. So Diana, in her search for Steve, goes, you know, head to head against the now reformed Ares. The ensuing chaos ignites a civil war, and realizing what she's done, she pleads for Ares to stop. She tries to plead to his reason, because he has to realize that as the god of war, his very presence incites war. They have an ideological argument about the meaning of justice, both believing their understanding to be the correct one. While roaming the wreckage, they find a child. They legitimately find just a baby under the rubble, orphaned by the two during their fight. Realizing all the destruction he caused and not knowing how to stop himself, Ares retreats away from the battlefield. The war continues. So that's kind of like that's really issue 60. You know, meanwhile, Steve is kidnapped by a group of refugee mythological creatures who are hiding out in this war-torn country. And I forgot the country's name. I think it was mentioned in 58, but I don't remember. So for now, it's just war-torn country, which I know, I'm awful. So these mythological creatures, it's specifically a fawn, Minotaur, and Pegasus, takes Steve to the lair of Aphrodite, and we get to see Aphrodite kind of like in a really big t-shirt and just kind of chilling. She like the goddess doesn't remember how she got there, and much like Ares, she seems to be not really acting like herself, her true self, or at least our understanding of what the goddess of love might act like. Steve convinces her to help him find Diana, and they all reunite in the capital. They had kind of made a big deal about Steve being gone and Diana needed to find him, and then ultimately they just kind of found each other. A little bit kind of meh. I thought there was something more to that, but I guess not. Yeah, no, Aphrodite's like, oh my god. It's cool though, because like every different artist kind of draws her a little differently, and so it kind of, I know it's not intentional that they did that, because, you know, different artists get on, they have different ways of drawing faces and different interpretation of the characters and how they look. But to me, it feels like, oh, they're changing the way she looks because, you know, beauty changes and our understanding of beauty kind of changes, and maybe Aphrodite changes the way she looks, which, I mean, would imply that she isn't always this very beautiful, like, super skinny, you know, model type person. But I can kind of put a little bit of credit where credit's not due, but I can kind of imagine. In the capital, they meet the prime minister of this torn nation, who is in a position that the civil war will either continue, or he can bring the opposing side to the table for peace talks. Diana and Steve help get the prime minister to the meeting location, and during this negotiation, it is interrupted by Ares. I think so too. Yeah, no, New 52 gods, nothing will ever compare. Those are my favorite versions of the gods. But yeah, no, I think that'd be a cool idea for Aphrodite. Ares shows up. He's like, yo, I realize I like war. It doesn't matter. And I'm just gonna keep fighting. And another fight breaks out. And eventually, Diana just kind of pleads to his, like, do you really care about this? Like, are you really so... Like, this is not anything of what is reasonable and stuff. And he's already kind of demoralized because, like, his idea of justice doesn't fit in when people are getting hurt, and he's this new guy who doesn't hurt people, even though he hurts people. He's lost because he doesn't really know who he is. And you kind of learn, like, why that is through this whole fight, because Aphrodite shows up. She kind of whispers something in his ear, makes him realize that, yeah, you're not yourself because you're not home anymore. And after that, Ares decides to leave, but not before the prime minister shows up and be like, yo, we brokered peace in, like, under a day, and we're kicking you out of the country because you caused all this destruction. It's kind of weird, kind of just, like, rushed and sudden, and Diana's like, but what do you mean? I've never done anything wrong in my life. And she gets kicked out of the country. I wish people would do that to a certain someone. But yeah, no, I'm not gonna go there. Not gonna go there. Anyway, so that kind of ends by issue 61. That's kind of the whole of Ares' story, and now Diana returns back to Virginia, you know, with Aphrodite in tow, and she's like, well, I found one god, where are the other gods? What happened to my home? And now she's trying to piece those things together. Returning home, Diana tries to hunt down clues of Themyscira and her mother and her, you know, all the Themyscirans. Aphrodite stays at home with Steve, makes fun of Steve, makes fun of their relationship and how boring it is, and she's 100% justified by that. During this time, I think they really wasted panel pages, but they do this whole, not the three stooges, but the three creatures that are now in man's world have to register with immigrations and customs enforcement, and, like, register as refugees, and, like, they face persecution and they're discriminated against. And it's kind of like, oh, I mean, I see what you're doing there, but also it's like, I really wish you wouldn't. because it seems disingenuous. So that is kind of just like these like different side stories going on. While searching for clues, Diana runs into Nemesis and the two battle. This leads to Veronica Cale showing up, claiming that Diana hurt her employee and that she's going to sue Diana because Veronica likes to keep gods in her basement. She literally captures them and she's like, I'm going to use you now because you're in my basement. And that's just how she rolls. Veronica, through Nemesis, has sort of pieced together what happened to Themyscira, and this enrages her because her daughter is currently, according to what happened in Rika's run, her daughter is being held by the Amazons due to a curse and being unable to essentially leave the island. If Themyscira is gone, that, through the logic, her daughter would also be gone forever. So she is rightfully angry because Diana made all these promises. Of course, this anger is being exacerbated by Nemesis, who feeds on rivalry and anger and the want to better your opponent and stuff like that. So she's feeding both Diana and Veronica Cale into like this battle with each other, and that's why Veronica is like really awkward and really just totally out of character. Eventually Diana realizes this. She's like, oh my god, we gotta stop fighting each other. This is what Nemesis wants. And she gives Veronica a hug. And I was like, wow, I wish that was me. I want to be hugged by Wonder Woman. And through the power of love, Veronica kind of comes to her senses in the sense that she doesn't trust Wonder Woman because she has no reason to, even though she does, because Wonder Woman always comes through. Diana always comes through. But she's entrusting Wonder Woman to start doing the research and seeing if she can't find her daughter and the rest of the Themyscirans. So at that point, this is kind of where the story has stopped. It feels like you can kind of 58 through 65, I think, is like the first part of the arc. Like, I think you can stop there and you can feel like you understand everything. Diana ends issue 65 with going off into the distance to find the other wayward magical creatures or wayward gods that might be other places. So in the course of the main 5 issues, that is a lot of story to unpack and a lot of different plots. Overall, my opinion is that it's a decent run. I think it's a solid run. There's hits or miss, but I think it's more to do with where the focus lies in the story. So, hold on. Okay. So it's a decent run. There's a lot that I don't like about the way Wilson writes the character, but I think that's because I have a very kind of narrow view of what the perfect Wonder Woman story should be like. So I'm trying to be, so I have to always like bring myself out of like my understanding of the character and what I believe is correct about the character, and understand of kind of look of like what are other people getting out of reading this, and ultimately it's a good story that they're getting out of it. At times it feels like she's leaning too heavily on Rika's foundation, which I know she kind of had to because they're building off of Rebirth and what happened there. But at the same time, it's like she's not here to impersonate Rika's style of writing and kind of writing. She should be trying to write her own story. And I think that's a tough balance for any writer going into any character, really, is finding their own voice, but also building upon the current foundation without starting over, because I think the constant reboots and the constant starting over of characters really just kind of degrade, really hurts. No, I'm trying to think of the right word. It tires out the audience. They get tired of like seeing all these reboots and seeing the same kind of like beginner story. So I think overall she's doing a good job of kind of picking up where Rika left off and building on that in her own way, even if I don't 100% agree with everything that she's done. You know, most of my criticisms will always be from the potential that's there and the unexplored details that she leaves, that any writer leaves with their story. I know I'm very picky with my Wonder Woman writers, and it's because I've been spoiled by the best Wonder Woman stories ever. I hope this doesn't end with Wonder Woman getting blown up. Yeah, no. Yeah. I'm just glad I'm really happy that we have Wilson, G. Willow Wilson writing Wonder Woman and not Brian Michael Bendis. Writing Wonder Woman. If Bendis was writing Wonder Woman, I might have some words. I might have a lot more words. And my criticisms that you're about to hear may seem overly harsh. I don't know if Bendis could potentially still write Wonder Woman. They're letting that man do whatever he wants. Also, welcome, Zach. I only know Wonder Woman comics. I don't know who was blown up. So these criticisms may seem harsh, but it's mostly like, I didn't really like that, and this is why. But someone else may really enjoy that. And that's the way you always gotta see when you do these reviews and when you hear people's opinions. He always destroys the character to fit the story he wants. He'll blow up. Oh, yeah. You're talking about him saying, like, the no more mutants kind of thing. Yeah, no, I understand. That's just the way he operates. But he's not writing Wonder Woman right now, and that's what counts. Rip Superman, stuff like that. So starting out, I have to get this off my chest. I have to say it. She needs to ditch Steve Trevor. She needs to blow him up. Pull a Bendis and blow him up out of the continuity. Literally cannot stand his character. And I tried. I really did try. And he contributes nothing of value to the story in my eyes. I don't want to think about John. I always hate when Wonder Woman shows up in Superman comics because they make it all weird and try to pull a Superman's always had feelings for Wonder Woman kind of situation. It's like, no thank you. Absolutely not. But back to Wonder Woman's love life, Steve Trevor. So, either she's got to just maybe not focus at all on the relationship and just focus on, like, the main plot. I don't need to really be reminded that Steve and Diana are in love. I understand that. I get that. I accept that somewhat. But I feel like every writer always tries to go above and beyond and to make sure we understand that Steve is the perfect man because he waits for Diana to get home. And it's like, yeah, I hope he waits for her to get home sometimes. I mean, they both have a job, but it's like they want to give him more brownie points for doing the bare minimum. Especially if they're not going to go beyond just like, oh, he waits for her and he cares for her. And it's like, I want to see like more of like, what is it about that stands out and what is it that he's doing beyond that? Because everyone can do that at the most basic level is like, be there for someone, listen to them. It's not that extraordinary for someone to do that, even if that person is Wonder Woman, so to speak. It just really doesn't feel organic in the context of the setting. It's just like, oh, in case you didn't realize they're in a relationship sort of situation. It's like, no, I know they're in a relationship. They don't need to say like, oh, I love you so much. Like, no, that doesn't need to happen. We get it. They're both working. They need to focus on their jobs instead of focusing on how much they love each other. And it's really funny when Aphrodite even points it out about how bland their love is. She's like, no, don't stop for me. I appreciate every single ounce of love, even stuff that's the most boring and basic love ever. She totally roasts them, and it's well deserved. Um, it just, if they're gonna continue, if Wilson is gonna continue to focus on Steve and continue to include him in the story, they need to not necessarily show conflict, but show them kind of working through the differences and working through like the misunderstandings, and especially given their job and given what Wonder Woman does and what Diana does, she goes off into different countries and like interferes and stuff, and that's a huge problem for someone who works for the US military. Like, where's the conflict there? You know, I don't need them to be fighting, but it's just like he kind of just accepts whatever Diana does. And you know, I'm not saying that like Diana can make mistakes and maybe she can do something that can hurt Steve, or maybe Steve can do something that can hurt her, but it's like there's no communication from them that feels organic and feels like a real relationship. There's ultimately no depth to Steve Trevor. He's essentially what men write like female love interest as, and while it's nice to see a man in that position, it just doesn't, it's just not interesting as a character. There's nothing to read, and there's no investment for me. And really, Diana only thinks about Steve Trevor for like a panel at a time before she's off doing her next mission. So it's kind of like, oh yeah, Steve, the guy that I love, he's there. So, you know, if Aphrodite is going to continue to show up in the comics, I hope that she's just making fun of Diana for like her white bread love. I would like a little more nuance that I feel like they were promising when you know, in the interviews that I was seeing, that I'm not seeing right now. So maybe that will change, maybe not, but I had to say it. Steve is boring. I know he's always kind of boring to me, but like it's just annoying at this point. Also, she needs to figure out her, it's just white bread. There's nothing to it. It's just, that's what it is. She needs to figure out what she wants to do with Veronica Cale. Is she a cardboard cutout of Super Friends Lex Luthor, or is she this conflicting antagonist that is forcibly bound to Diana because of her own actions, which is what was presented in Ricka's run, and I think should be carried out into the coming issues. Is like, yes, Veronica Cale is Diana's rival and enemy and adversary, but also Diana cares deeply about Veronica's daughter and about Veronica herself, and I think that's such an interesting dynamic, much more than you get from other heroes and villains dynamic, because at the end of the day, like, Wonder Woman sees Veronica Cale as like a good, not necessarily a good person, but a redeemable person, and someone that she is willing to work with to, you know, ultimately get to the goal that she needs. She's not afraid to like do what she needs to help Veronica Cale, and that's, to me, super interesting among all the other, any of the other conflicts that Diana like, that any superhero has with their villains, and Diana seems to have this dynamic with all of her villains. Yeah, I think Diana could use a little pumpernickel in her life. You know, instead of this white bread, it sticks to the roof of your mouth, so. So those are my two kind of character issues that I'm having right now. As far as like things that I think really need to be improved on and really kind of sometimes serve as a weakness for the story is the focus of the actual story or their plot. Towards the end of issue 65, the larger mystery is kind of revealed. It's revealed that because Ares killed himself, it created this paradox that like basically booted everyone out of Themyscira. It was like a hard reset. It's like Themyscira was blue screened from existence. And to me, that's super interesting. And I know it's kind of been done before. Themyscira goes missing, Diana has to find it. But ultimately, I think that's an interesting story. However, the build up to that like reveal is very disconjointed, and you're not even sure, like, is the focus of the story with Ares and the Civil War, or is the focus with these refugees? There's a lot of different plots that kind of just exist on their own that don't really connect well. You know, you can't go halfway multiple ways. You know, you can't go part of the way one way and part of the way the other way, and then you're kind of moving towards the same way. You want there to be like a clear focus and a clear kind of goal with the themes you're trying to address, which, you know, a tonal shift every few chapters doesn't do the story any good. So what that results in is like a bunch of generally acceptable morals and ideas about what's right and wrong. Like, justice doesn't mean that one side has to be right. You know, justice is blind, stuff like that. That's like, oh yeah, I mean, I agree with that, but it doesn't really get to the heart of like, well, what is justice? What does it mean to be blind in your actions? Just actions. Or can you truly be blind when you're acting with, you know, this assumption of how the world works, sort of thing, that wasn't explored. This is especially present to me in the refugee allegory that they use through like the three, through the Faun, the Pegasus, and the Minotaur. I personally think we just need to stop using mythical creatures to explain real world problems, and I understand like that's a good vehicle to explain these like struggles that these people go through, but it ultimately serves as a disservice given the current culture and climate, which, I can't really fault. Who knows when G. Willow Wilson was planning this? It could have been a couple, like 3 years ago, when maybe this wasn't necessarily as bad as it is now. And it especially gets annoying to me because there's Themyscirans that exist on Themyscira that look like women and look like people from this earth that could have served in the same place as the Faun, the Pegasus, and the Minotaur. And it probably would have been even emphasized that struggle more, because like these women are coming in and they have to, they're not from here, they're not, from America or even this world. Like, what is that struggle like? So maybe she'll get to that. This is still ongoing. There's a lot of potential, but I think if you're gonna bring in these heavy topics, you can't go halfway. You need to devote your story to telling this topic. And there's nothing inherently wrong with going one direction and not necessarily like giving into the fan service of Diana going on an adventure and finding the gods. You can focus on like these heavy topics. That's what, you gotta lean into that when you're writing Wonder Woman. Similarly, the whole Civil War thing was almost entirely unnecessary. You could have put Ares on an island and put Diana on that same island and achieve the same goal. I personally believe Diana would never needlessly get herself involved in a conflict like that, but Ares was there, so she felt the need to confront them, and it almost seemed comical to have her get kicked out of the country. I mean, maybe that's what I would do if someone started a civil war by dropping bombs accidentally. It just, I know it's superheroes and it's not supposed to be believable, but it just seemed too out there to tell an important thematic story. Diana's never gonna face any real ramifications for being kicked out of this post Civil War society or country. So I was just like, okay, I guess it was like a mini arc within the arc, but I wasn't a fan. So, Wilson telling several stories at once that all feed into that larger what happened to the Themyscira. But ultimately the strength of the story is that very thing, is like what happened to the Themyscira, what happened to all these gods. And you really see that in Diana's interactions with Aphrodite, and how she deals in the absurdity of dealing with gods living among mortals all of a sudden. And I think that's, one, it's hilarious, and two, I think she has the most focus on that, and she does really well working with that. I think she wrote Ares and Aphrodite really well. I think she wrote Ares really well, because Ares wasn't necessarily the Ares that we recognize from like other Wonder Woman comics. He's like this changed guy. He's like, I've gone on a spiritual journey and found myself kind of person. that I think is funny, but also like you're curious as to why that is. And so she's able to play with our understandings of the mythology in a way that's kind of, it's a bit comical, but also is like, I wonder what Diana's gonna do to get to the bottom of this, because she obviously wants to figure out what's wrong. And it gives the story kind of like this Dogma vibe, where it's like all these gods are kicked out of heaven sort of situation. And I think if Wilson leans into that, I think it's gonna do really well, and it's gonna make it really interesting in ways that are different than what other writers have done. You know, I want Diana to have to deal with her her wacky relatives. I think that's really funny. Towards the end of 64 and 65, I feel like Wilson is finally getting to the part she really originally wanted to write, which was Diana reuniting with Olympus and hopefully with the Themyscirans at some point. Again, that is my hope. I assume a lot, and then it doesn't happen, so maybe I should just stop assuming. But she's very good with the weird relative angle that the Pantheon kind of fills, and to me is what keeps me going, what keeps me reading. Overall, it's shaping up to be a solid run. There's been some rocky starts. There's stuff that I don't necessarily like, but overall doesn't affect me from wanting to not read it. Wilson is kind of getting into more of Diana's voice. I think she's really, the first few issues are like, I don't really want to like step on anyone's toes, kind of want to write of Diana that's familiar. And now she's like, okay, so that's been established. Now this is the Diana we're moving in with. And she's never struggled to understand what Diana stands for. And she's never struggled to explain why Diana stands for something, which to me is always a victory. Like, if you can get that about Diana, if you can get like her core concepts and just kind of like remind the audience of what those things are, then you're writing a good Wonder Woman story. She's writing Diana as like a established hero. She's, that's already been working in man's world. It's not so much a year one kind of story or a reboot, origin story, which, it's difficult for writers to come in and build upon what's already existing, but I think Wilson has been doing a really good, really good job with that. And the choices Diana is making aren't naive ones. She's just a character that's still in progress and still growing, which to me is what every character should be. Even the established ones, they should all be learning something at the end of the day. So ultimately, these core kind of parts of Wonder Woman that are shown throughout the run, keep me coming back and keep me interested in the story. Mostly I'm curious how this is going to read overall, because again, I still feel like I'm piecing together information and assuming a lot of things. But I think, people wanting to jump in on Wilson's run are going to find a really enjoyable story out of it. So yeah, that's kind of what's happened on Wonder Woman, the current issues. Before I move into kind of the questions that I got from Mars, does anyone else have any other questions they would like to add on top of that? One thing about me is that I always try to find humor in the stuff that I'm reading, which is why I kind of hone in on stuff that I can make memes out of. That's just the way I kind of operate when I'm reading comics, because sometimes it's like, oh, this is just silly, and I like to point that out. So if I'm finding humor out of finding humor in like a good-natured kind of way, not finding humor of like, oh my god, this is the worst run to ever happen, then it's a story that I'm gonna keep coming back to, because I can't be too picky with Wonder Woman comics. There's only so many that you can choose from. So yeah. And also thank you again, Mars, for sending me those questions right before the start of the episode, so I have stuff to answer. Also, by the way, everyone, chat, please appreciate the wonderful, I guess, thumbnail cover for this episode. This one, they actually took the cover This is the cover for issue 63, which banner, right? It's also a thumbnail, banner/thumbnail. It, yeah, I think so too. I think this issue 63 cover, served the purpose of the banner really well. It fit because it was like all white, so you could just like pull from there, and I thought that was pretty good. But it's, yeah, I really like that one. So thank you again, Mars. Seem to be getting better and better at these, and it makes my content super interesting. I get to trick people into thinking I have this really great show by that banner. You will. Okay, there's gonna be other comics and other good, like, covers to come around, so you have plenty of material to work with. So yeah. Thank you again. And for the questions that we're about to answer. Okay. So, starting out, how does this is again from Mars, that comic girl. You can find her on Twitter, and she does all my banners. How does G. Willow Wilson's run of Wonder Woman so far compare to that of other writers who have been a part of Rebirth? It's definitely better than Robinson's run, which is a very low bar, but after coming out of that, it's like, oh my god, thank you so much. I would say that it's I would say middle of the pack, in the sense that, like, if the top of the pack was Greg Rucka's run and the bottom of the pack was Robinson's run, I would say it's on par of the kind of stories that Steve Orlando brought in, and you know, that ultimately I've enjoyed. So it's like, I like Steve Orlando's stuff a little more, but his was just very like, this is this one shot, this is the only time I'm gonna write this character, or I mean, I hope he comes back to write the character. So whereas Wilson is like working on a whole kind of arc that a lot of these other writers that have come in haven't. So definitely better than Robinson's. Definitely better than oh god, I can't remember. Is it Shea Fontana? Hers was okay. Just kind of like an in-betweener before Robinson got on, that I wasn't a big fan of. So I think Wilson has a better base, and I think more writing skill. Yeah, more writing skill and more writing. What's the word that I'm thinking of? Writing chops. She has more writing chops for the character that I think really serve well. That ultimately I think make it worth picking up. So as far as like favorite and least favorite aspect, you know, what's been your favorite and least favorite aspect of the run? I feel like I kind of, yeah, no, I think Steve Orlando has a lot of damn experience with the many books that he's come out with, but she definitely has the experience for writing a series, right? You know, writing a long-term series that I think, you know, because of Miss Marvel and because it's been writing one character for so long, she can come in and write these longer arcs that I think it's a skill that you need. There's some people that really excel at the short little arc, and there's some people that are really in it for the long run. So she's doing a good job. So I'm trying to remember the interview, and I can't remember it fully. But what she said when she originally was brought on was that she wanted to build off of what Rucka started. Like, ultimately, she wanted to get back to that rebirth stage and build from that story, which is probably why it feels like it's emulating a lot of Rucka right now, because she was still kind of building from that and building from his world. And she also wanted to show a lot of Steve Trevor, which I was a little worried about. And and I'm still really worried about, mostly because I'm not super invested in the relationship she's been showing so far. I'm trying to think what else. And she did say she wanted to do something different. Yes, it wasn't attacking against me personally. Literally. And she did say she wanted to do something different with Ares. And I think that's kind of like a hint of what she wanted to do something different with the gods, which to me always excites me. I am 100% behind any writer that wants to do a little twist on the gods. Like, as much as I'm like about Azzarello and Cliff Chang's run, they did a lot of good things with the gods that I really enjoyed ultimately, like from design down to like some of the characterizations of the gods that I think was really good. So any writer that wants to come in and kind of play with that, do it. I think these the Pantheon has been around long enough that you can kind of twist them around and play with them a little bit. So yeah, I'm not sure what her end goal is, because I don't think she's not going to tell us that. But I'm interested to see how it's all gonna pan out and where the story will go from them even after she's departed. But it looks like she's here for the long term. Okay. Well, that was interesting, chat. Sorry about that. That really threw me for a loop. But anyway, Craig, welcome to Themysciran Agenda. And yes, I absolutely adore Aphrodite in this run. I think Aphrodite's hilarious. She seems like she's, like depressed or something. Like she's gonna be eating out of Diana's like favorite tub of ice cream in the next panel, which I think is absolutely hilarious. And I like how she's like a little bit despondent about love, which to me is hilarious. She's the goddess of love, but yet she's like, oh my god, these mortals, I'm tired of their love, which I feel like is reasonable if you had to, like, you're suddenly in man's world and having to see all these people give like affirmations of love, and for them to be kind of mediocre affirmations of love. So it's funny to see her have to deal with that. So, but yeah, that was. Sorry, I'm thinking of that person that was in chat. Yeah, no. I don't even know why that person. That is not at all what we're talking about, subject-wise, so. No, they're gone. No, they're gone. I insta-banned them just because it was, like, totally random stuff, and also, like, their username. Like, come on. No, I'll send you what they wrote in case you didn't see it, but that was pretty funny. Okay, other questions. Favorite and least favorite aspect. I feel like I've already kind of touched on. Favorite aspect would definitely be Aphrodite and the gods and their personalities. Least favorite aspect, Steve Trevor. You would think he'd kind of be middle of the pack. At least I don't really care about him, but like, no, I like actively do not enjoy his presence in this run. Craig kind of reminds me when Hera. Yes, you are. I remember that, and I'm trying to pinpoint, like, if I think that was specifically, I think that was specifically Azzarello's run, but was it? I can't remember off the top of my head, but I do remember Hera being like super annoying and kind of clingy when she was in man's world, which I think is super funny. I always think it's funny when the gods, like, the thing is, the gods are super flawed anyway, and suddenly they're like oh my god, I have to deal with mortals. Like I cannot handle this. And so I think that is a good aspect, a really good aspect of this run. Is the arc self-contained? Man, this just make me think I should reread Azarella's run and do an episode about it. I mean, I have to at some point. It is time. It is probably getting to a point where I have to kind of review that and give my full, especially since I have most of those issues signed by Cliff Chang. I feel like I owe it to them to like reread all that. Yeah, that's right. They were roommates. Oh, that was weird and great at the same time. I mean, Hera's a bitch all the time to Diana and to like the Amazons, but it was pretty funny. Mars also asked, is the arc self-contained? Yes. I think ultimately you don't really need to know much about Ruka's rebirth run to really understand it. You know it kind of exists in what he built up, but you ultimately don't need to know every aspect of it because they explain it to you. I think it helps to have read Rebirth because it's a good story, but ultimately you don't need it to understand Wilson's content. Yeah, I don't have any of the omnibuses. I think it'd be cool. I just don't have anywhere to put them if I ever buy them. But I do have every single issue of Azarella's run. And I have a good chunk of them signed by Cliff Chang. A lot of my favorite covers, because his art is just amazing. And I think some of his best art on Wonder Woman. So it'd be nice if I had room for all these. Like, if I could get, like, Ruka's run omnibus, like Gail Simone's run omnibus, like that, I would be set. Those would be my two. So that's cool that you have the hardcovers. The hardcover comics are nice. They look really nice on a shelf, and to read and to hold because it's big. Any other questions? Those were all the questions that I had. The few that I got from Mars and from the chat. I have 3. Oh, that's cool. I would love some Golden Age omnibuses. I'm pretty jealous. Those sound real nice. Like, I have all the comics digitally, but having some Golden Age omnibuses, that would be real nice. They're just so big. I thought about getting omnibus for, like, the New Gods. I think that'd be cool too. I'd like to have that. I read the run that Tinian did briefly, the Witching Hour. And so I read like the Wonder Woman centered issues and then a few of like the Justice League Dark issues. It was interesting. Ultimately, I feel like I've come to a point where I'm just kind of focusing on Wonder Woman's main comics, not comics she's appearing in, because I generally don't like the way other writers write her in those, like, guest starring comics. But I thought it was interesting what they were doing with Hecate, and they're playing on the stuff from War of the Gods, and what is it, the whole Cersei and Diana being connected because they're both moon signs and stuff like that. So I thought that was interesting and fun to play with. And it was really funny because as soon as I saw the story, I was like, oh, is this like a playing on this thing from Perez's comics or whatever? And Tini was like, no comment. So got him. No, I'm just kidding. That's just what happens when you've read too much Wonder Woman. So yeah, I thought it was interesting. Is she still appearing in Justice League Dark? Is she still in those comics? Yeah, no, I thought the way he wrote Cersei was really interesting. It's like she's not exactly a villain here. She's just kind of like, it's happening. You know, I can't really stop it. Guess we gotta deal with it. So I thought that was interesting. I always like when villains who are like villains at one point are kind of just like reluctant helpers of the hero. I think Cersei should appear, is a perfect reoccurring character, like not main character, but a character for Justice League Dark. She's magic. She's like the witch, you know, the sorceress from time. So that would be cool if she shows up again. I hope some more villains show up in the Wonder Woman comics, not just Cersei. But it looks like Giganta is going to be showing up, so that'll be fun. So, but yeah. I mean, that's really all I have for this catch-up chat. I just wanted to go over 60 through 65, which is what I was, you know, needing to read. There's still more to read about, you know, Wilson's run, so it'll be interesting to see where it goes. But I think I'll probably call it here, unless there's other final questions that you guys would like to ask. Yeah, no, I'm excited for her to be here, Giganta. I think I haven't seen her for a long time in Wonder Woman comics, it feels like. In a role that matters, not like, oh, punch, you're done. So that'll be interesting. I will say, it's something I thought of, G. Willow Wilson is like, gives off a lot of Gail Simone vibes in the way she writes humor in her characters, which is kind of why I keep wanting to read this and keep kind of want to see where it goes. But ultimately, she is her own writer with her own voice. But it's the kind of humor that I really like, that I think she gets, that reminds me of what I really liked about reading Gail Simone's run. So I love you too, Mars, and thank you as always for stopping by. So, but yeah, that's episode 10. Can you believe it? It's been 10 episodes. We're almost to 12 episodes. That's crazy. That's 12 months. Oh, Cat. Yeah, I know that was like a standalone issue. I wasn't a huge fan of that, mostly because I would have preferred it to be with actual people, because they were trying to tell this refugee struggle. But I do appreciate of what it was trying to do. It wasn't my favorite, but you know, it worked for the subject. And they brought back Ferdinand, which I forgot to mention. Ferdinand's back. He's one of my favorite characters in Wonder Woman. He's a chef, but he's also a minotaur. And I wish he was in Wonder Woman comics more, because I think he's a lot of fun, and he's a good guy. But yeah, that's all I have. Next episode will be the 28th again? Yeah, it will be March 28th. So exactly 1 month from now. On a Thursday. Ferdinand is back. He's in a standalone comic with the other misfits. It's cute. It's good to see him again. So yeah, March 28th will be episode 11. I will have a poll this time. Since the month was so short, I didn't really want to kind of focus too much on something, just because I was really busy. There's a lot going on. But there is going to be a poll for potential next topic. If you have any suggestions for episode 11 or for the show in general, you can always find me at Llama Amelia. It's EMILIA on Twitter, and you can hit me up about Wonder Woman questions, any of that. I'm always happy to answer. And as far as my sources go for this episode, it's all just issue 60 through 65 by, you know, the actual comics. There was nothing really else that I was really referencing. But yeah, I will see everyone on March 28th. And this episode will be uploaded to YouTube on Saturday, most likely, because I gotta leave it on here for 24 hours, but it'll be uploaded this weekend. And hopefully I'll get to work on updating my scripts, so that way I can attach them to the videos and you have something to read and reference. So, thank you again, Mars, Zach, Andrew, Craig, all for joining me on this episode. And thank you to anyone else in the chat who joined. And I will see you guys in the next episode. Bye!